figured what we'd do today, talk to you a little bit about kind of construction, what's going on in our city, kind of what's happened in the past. Again, I usually go do a similar spiel. In fact, I've already done it to the real estate agents. They ask me to come out first day every year, and I've got still a couple of companies to go to, but they like to hear kind of what's going on in our community, and I would assume that that's exactly the reason you showed up today, to kind of hear what's going on in our city and what we've been up to. A lot of people think we just sit up there and twiddle our thumbs and no, it's the police. Eat donuts, but we don't eat donuts. I try to bring in sausage and biscuits on Friday for my crew. But we actually stay extremely busy, and if anybody's driven around this town, you know that, because there's construction going on everywhere. Now, what I'd like to point out is, in this information you have, and this is available on our City of Murfreesboro website, there's a lot of information on that website. And if you ever can't sleep at night, just go on there, and I promise you this is going to put you out, okay? Now, every year, and for some time, we have produced what they call the end-year report. That's what you have. And I'm going to have to use these because I can't read without them anymore. But one thing I'd like to show you in here, and we've been tracking this information for, again, quite some time, since '87. And there's some graphs in here, and I'd like for you to look at them with me. But the one thing I want to point out is the front page is a summary, and it talks about how much land we've annexed. It's talked about how many public hearings we've had. It talks about how many variance requests we've had. That pretty much sums it up. But here's a few things that I would like to point out. We all know that construction is going to continue, and I'm going to talk about the 2035 plan here in just a minute after I get off this. But the one thing that is really interesting in this is there's a paragraph in here that says there's 535 single-family lots available for building within the city. That's extremely low. We used to run about 2,000 in inventory. So they're building houses just about as fast as the lots come online. And I can guarantee you, out of those 535, they're not all the really desirable building lots. But that's all the inventory we got. Now, something else I'd like to point out, if you'll look in there, there's a graph, and it says City of Murfreesboro single family permitted. And the reason this is kind of interesting is from 16 to 17, we dropped from 1,431 permits to 1,237. Now, why is that? Is the economy slowing? And this is what the real estate agents want to know. Is the economy slowing down? Are we getting ready to go into a recession? Because what we do know is that it's cyclical. Always construction goes up, it'll come back down. Well, if you'll look at this graph, and this is why this is really good information, at least it is for the planning department and building codes, when we do our budgets, when we're looking to see what we think and anticipating for the future, we look at these graphs, and you can see how you see when we hit the downturn. You can see what happened right there. I mean, this is a good visual aid for us and anybody that wants to go on the website and look at it. We'll talk a little bit more here in just a minute about why I think that those permits are down. And I tell everybody what my information that I'm going to give you, I can't predict the future, but I'll give you my nickel's opinion. And again, that nickel won't buy you a cup of coffee at any Quick Sack, as you very well know. So you get what you pay for, okay? The other thing I wanted to show you here is the valuation. There's a little chart in there, and it talks about valuation of residential permits. If you'll know, from 16 to 17, even though the number of permits dropped, the valuation went up. So, and again, I'll give you my nickel's opinion of why I think that is. But you can also see in there, you can see when the market just bottomed out in there. I mean, it's evident. In fact, if you'll look back and you'll even trace back to 9/11, you'll see where the market dipped during that time. So it's good to keep a history. I tell everybody I can't predict the future, but we can surely learn from the past. If you look there's another one in here, and it's called City of Murfreesboro Multifamily Units Permitted. Everybody knows what those are. Those are apartments. That's been very controversial. You've seen it. You probably read it in the newspaper about all the apartments coming to town. If you'll notice, from, and you know, I've done this thing several years, and I have, every year I say I'm going to put page numbers on there, and I have not done that. So sorry about that. It says multifamily units permitted. Let's give you a minute to find that. But what we can see in here is we went from 2016 514 permits to 1,233 permits. So residential went down, number of multifamily went up. And I'm going to tell you why I think that is. Again, my Nichols opinion. So let's talk a little bit about what those numbers kind of tell me. We know that the market will adjust. And when I say that, I'm not talking about it. What I consider what was a catastrophic failure was back when we had 5 years of nothing. We all remember that. But the market does adjust itself. And what we have seen for those of us, and just out of curiosity, how many people are local here? Okay, great. Went to the real estate agents. I went to Bob Parks Realty and asked that same question. There's about 70, 75 people in the room. There were 9 of us that were local, okay? So, gives you an idea of how many people are moving into our community. But what I wanted to talk to you about is how all this is affecting the market, because we have a lot of people wanting to move in here because we have good schools, the cost of living, the job availability, all those reasons that people want to move into our community because I was born and raised here as well. Raised my family here. It's a great place to be. I'm telling you, traveled all over the world. I'm always happy to get right back here. We'll be retiring from the city in July. I've been at the city for 30 years. Plan on staying here though. Not planning on moving anywhere. So it's a great community, people moving in, but all that influx of people moving in, our land values are continually going up. I just showed you and illustrated that number of house permits went down, but the valuations went up. So, and these are things that the city does not regulate. Cost of construction, we don't regulate. Materials, labor, all these things we don't have anything to do with. This is free market. Land, big one is land cost. You know, you can remember, if you've been around here for any period of time, when you bought land for $500 an acre. Now people, depending on whether it's commercial or what have you, they're paying anywhere from $15,000 an acre to $20,000 an acre for stuff for residential, to commercial lots sell by the square foot. $7 to $15 a foot. So as those land costs go up, as the construction, as labor, as concrete, materials, as all that stuff goes up, it gets harder and harder to build starter homes. So what has taken the place of our starter homes today? Townhomes and apartments, absolutely. That's why Evergreen Farms, everybody is familiar with Evergreen Farms, right? The starter homes. Evergreen Farm is out Casey Lane. There's probably 5,000 houses in there. The 1,200 square foot starter homes that people would move out of an apartment. Most of us in here lived in an apartment at some point in time in our history to start off with, and we bought that starter house. But as land goes up in value and all those things I just talked about go up, we can no longer supply that around here. And it's not because we don't want starter homes, it's because there's a cost associated with being able to build that 1,200 or 1,500 square foot house. The average lots out there today are 65 to 75,000, and that's the cheapest ones. So, and they'll go on up from there. You can't build a 1,200 square foot house on a $65,000 lot. You just can't do it. The numbers don't work. There's a point of diminishing return. You have to build a house that will, with the economics, work where you can actually get your money back out of it. So what has happened, I believe, is the lot costs have went up, development costs, the infrastructure for the developer to go out and put in the underground utilities. As everything goes up, the price per lot goes up. As the price per lot, that kind of dictates the housing market that they're going to be building. Now, the results of that are that people are moving into apartments. They're having to. We don't have an abundance of starter homes in Murfreesboro. It's not, and here again, sometimes people want to point the finger at us. We don't control that. That's free market. The land cost, what some farmer sells his land to a developer for, that's between them. We don't get involved in that. But it definitely affects what houses will be. If you'll drive around and look, I challenge you to look, most of the houses are in the $300,000 range. 300 on up, right? So once the market, how many $300,000 houses do we need? 400,000 in town. So there's a point to where the market will adjust because we just don't, everybody can't move in that. Now, what has taken place in the starter homes? The townhomes. When people move out of the apartments and decide to move in or can qualify, then they're going into the townhomes because you're getting more density on the acreage. Therefore, you can afford to build smaller, and the prices. I'm not saying they're cheap by any means because they're probably in the cheapest ones would probably be out there in the 130s to on up. In fact, and now there's a whole segment that's moving into empty nesters. Somebody like me, the kids are gone, want to downsize. You don't want the maintenance. So now we have a lot of people that are my age that are now downsizing and moving into the higher end townhomes, not the starters, but moving in 2 and 3 bedroom. Those can range up to 300 plus as well. So market's changing. We have a segment of our community that their life is changing, just like me. And we're looking to downsize, looking to get out of that. I have 7 acres. I'm not sure how much longer I want to mow 7 acres. So that being said, I'm not so sure that the market is slowing as much as the availability of lots, the prices, all the things that I've talked about has kind of reflected into what we're seeing. Now next year, if we see that continue to go down, I'd say we are heading for a market adjustment. But it will adjust. It's got to. There's a point of diminishing return where things get so high that the market will adjust itself. To talk to you now a little bit about the economics and kind of why, I'd like to talk to you what we've been up to instead of just eating those donuts and twiddling our fingers. And I've been the planning director for 3 years. A lot of y'all I'm sure have heard of Joseph a lot. Joseph retired 3 years ago. They moved me to the planning department I was building codes director. They moved me over there for 6 weeks. That was kind of a good joke because I've been over there 3 years. But I'll have to agree, the city manager did not tell me what year that 6 weeks would be served in. So technically, he didn't lie to me, okay? So I have enjoyed the planning department. I really have wonderful bunch, very, very, very bright individuals. They know exactly what they're doing. But a few of the accomplishments we have made in the last 3 years since I've been there. Has anybody ever heard about the historic bottoms? Everybody knows where Clark Iron and Metal, probably. That's the bottoms. And it was originally called the bottoms back years ago. It used to flood. And that's the reason before Broad Street was built, that was the bottoms, it flooded. But we referred to it as the historic bottoms because to me it is historic and it's an industrial area we have. I want to show you another one before I get into these. The other one, and I hope y'all are familiar with it because we did a lot of press. We had charrettes where people come in and talk, is the Highland study across Broad Street. Now, we didn't study the entire downtown because there's a price tag when you start doing these. So we study an area, and then we can expand that area if need be. But the interesting thing about these 2 areas is the oldest part of town, the bottoms in the Highland area. What we do know is that in a city's life cycle, there's a point to where you start redeveloping your city. Doesn't mean you just tear everything down, but it will start redeveloping. People have renewed interest in living in walkable neighborhoods. Our downtown is the most walkable, livable area we have. And there's a lot of interest. In fact, some of the interest has come in the new Judicial Building. Everybody knows that. It'll be open sometime before the end of the year. We have new parking structure downtown. You've seen new businesses come in, Puckett's, for instance. You know, our downtown, for those of us that's lived here forever, we knew 15, 20 years ago, if you went around that square after 8 o'clock, nobody was there. No cars, no nothing. Now, I challenge you, if you go by that square at 11 o'clock at night, the whole square, there's people parked, there is a nightlife to the downtown, and it's coming back. And people have an interest to move down. We also have a city block that we bought. Everybody knows where the church building, the bell tower, you've heard talk about the bell tower. The city owns that entire block. We have a parking lot, and then the bank was on that site. They are relocating, moving out, and we have taken proposals to redevelop that block. The things that we want to see on that downtown is a little boutique hotel, which I think would stay full all the time, because our hotels out on Med Center do. That's why you see people continually building hotels, and during the summer times, our Park and Recs department does a great job. As well, all of our departments do, but Parks and Recs, they have all kind of events during the summertime where people come into Middle Tennessee. We're so centrally located that if you have an event in east or west, everybody has to drive so far, so we're right where we need to be to draw all these people to come in for soccer events, for all kind of stuff. We know TSSAA has been here for years, so all those things bring people in, bring money into our economy. So what we'd like to see downtown is there's no place for people to go stay downtown. So a little boutique hotel, some more office parking structure. We need more parking downtown. We've done a parking study, and we know that we want to expand our central business district, but we got to look seriously at parking downtown before we can do that, expand it. These are all things that came out of the Highland study, recommendations. Now, this study, and the one thing I do want to point out, the bottoms in the Highland study, it's not my study. I'm just the planning director. It wasn't the planning department study. It's y'all's study. We opened this up. We had, I forgot, 4 or 5 public meetings where we invited the public. We wanted the people that live downtown, the stakeholders, the business owners, and anybody else that lives in our city to come and give us comments on how they think the downtown needs to redevelop. So this is your study. It was your information. I hope you made it to some of the charrettes. If you didn't, I'm sure Channel 3, they could probably go back and they recorded some of them. And it's interesting. We had a good turnout. Actually, we had a great turnout. People give us a lot of input, and the consultants took all that input. The one common theme that we kept hearing during all these charrettes that we had was hotels, more places for people to live, so they can walk to work, and the people downtown, the rooftops are what support the commercial. So the people that are living downtown will help keep a vibrant downtown. And I mean, in my opinion, I think we have one of the most beautiful courthouses and squares in all Tennessee, in my opinion. And it's been remodeled. If you'll go around and look, a lot of attorneys have bought buildings and remodeled them, but they put a lot of money in. Now what you're going to start seeing is that blending over to the streets downtown. If you notice, you already see people going in and remodeling buildings and selling them. In fact, interesting little note, some of the most expensive square footage, and I'm talking about single family residential, has been sold downtown. Not out in the newer subdivisions, outlying subdivisions, but downtown, which indicates to me that people are wanting to relocate and reinvest in our downtown. There's some exciting things that I think you're going to see happening. Like I said, the block that the city owns, we're taking proposals for that. And like I said, in the element of that we want to see also are condos downtown, where they can be built and people can buy them to help get people downtown. And as we see, there's probably, I'm going to say, there's not a month that goes by that somebody, 1 or 2 people, don't come in to talk to me about redeveloping somewhere downtown or buying a couple of houses and redeveloping. But now, we wanted to redevelop, and the reason we did this study is you can do 2 things. Redevelopment's going to happen. Whether we do the study, whether we don't, it's going to happen. The question is how do we want it to redevelop? Because by doing the study and by implementing some things, we can try to preserve our downtown, and to me that's very important. I like when people go in and remove buildings and structures, I like to make sure that they keep, if you will, the feel of our downtown. If you drive downtown, the architecture that's downtown, I'm talking about the houses, the old craftsman style houses, the bungalows. If they leave, I'd like to see that style come back. You don't want to plop something real modern in there. Now, sometimes we can't help that, but it's kind of neat to keep our culture, to keep who we are, to keep the architecture, to preserve that. Now, it's not a historic district. There is down Main Street a historic district. We didn't study that. That's already preserved. Now, and this is not a historic preservation district, but it does encourage people to try to keep in harmony with what's in their surroundings. And if you go downtown, if you go down Highland, it's had, and when we did this study, they came up with 4, I'm going to call them character areas. Highland Avenue is far different from Maple Street, which is different from Spring Street, which is different from Manny Avenue. So in those character areas, and what staff is doing now that we have the study, we're looking at doing an overlay with those character areas and plugging those in, and then the overlay, and you'll see in the future, hopefully before the end of the year, we'll be taking that to the Plan Commission, City Council for adoption. And it's a guide to let people go in, and we have all different zonings downtown. We have duplex zoning, we have RS4 lot sizes, we have RS8. So we don't want to go in and try to rezone, so we just do an overlay and try to plug in those character areas that were defined in our Highland study. So another thing I want to talk to you about is the design guidelines. Does anybody know what design guidelines are? There you go. The design guidelines, the only place that we actually have before we adopted these, and they are adopted, and all this information is on the city website, by the way. You can go to the city website and look at any of this information that I'm showing you up here. The design guidelines, the only place we actually have design guidelines before we adopted this was Mid-Center Parkway. When we did Mid-Center Parkway, did a master plan, and in the zoning ordinance we actually had written in some design parameters for the buildings. Now I challenge you, if you drive out through Mid-Center Parkway, I think it looks really nice. I think we've done a great job. You have really nice looking buildings. In fact, that's some of the highest commercial real estate in town. And why do people buy out there? Because of the way it looks. It's neat, it's clean. You have hotels, restaurants, and there's a lot of people live down there. There's a lot of apartments that have come in, but they are high-end apartments. They're average $1,200 to $1,500 a month is what those apartments, the last ones that were built out there, from my understanding. So, but that is what design guidelines can do, is it can help set the architecture in an area. The design guidelines that I just showed you, it's not for downtown because we have the study and the character areas. So, but other areas besides the downtown, it puts minimum criteria for buildings and designs, and we took in account industrial areas. You don't want to brick an industrial building. You can't go out and brick, let's say Amazon. That's concrete tilt-up walls. We know that would be cost prohibitive. So there's allowances for industrial type, for office buildings. It does not, however, address residential. State law says we can't dictate residential unless it's in a planned development, then they can, but other than that. So this will actually give us, or give developers that come into town, if you will, information on what they can design to and the materials and what have you they can use. We don't dictate the architecture of it, what it looks like. We more dictate the materials that can be used. So that has been adopted. So we've talked about the Highland, the bottom study, the design guidelines, our year-end report. Last but least is the 2040 Major Transportation Plan. Does anybody know what this document is, or this map is, or about? We just adopted it a month or so ago. It has been recorded. I signed it, the chairman signed it, it's been recorded. This is a 40-year plan for road construction in our city. When we did the 2030, and I told you I'd talk about the 2035 plan that has also been adopted. The 2035 plan, for us to keep growing, and we know people want to continue to move in here, we have definitive boundaries. I mean, we have Smyrna, we have the county property that we do annex when somebody requests annexation, and just for the record, we can't go out and annex anybody. They have to come to us and ask for it. But as the city grows, and just for the record also, we all live in the county. Some of us live in the city as well. And when we annex into the county or take that in, if somebody requests, our Our city can only grow so big, though, because we have definitive boundaries. We can't go into Smyrna. We can't go into Woodbury. So we know we have, and years ago there was an urban growth boundary that told us what our growth boundaries were. So we don't have unlimited land. We have so much. And we also know that we'll be limited by the water we can take out of the river and by sewer, because we treat that, we put it back in. We're limited on how much we can actually put back into the Stones River. In fact, we bought 2 farms, the Jordan Farm and, what's the other farm? I can't think. Coleman Farm. And if you go out there during the summertime, you'll see us spraying water out there. That's water that we can't put in the river. We got to get rid of it somehow. It's been treated. It's reuse water, and we spray it on those fields out there to get rid of it, because limiting factors in the future for growth will be water, sewer, and available land. So the 2035 plan talks about those things, and a few things it says is, the sprawl. For years, we'd go out, people would buy a big farm, and they'd cut it up into lots. And to make that land last longer, you're going to have to increase density, smaller lots. And you'll see that now. If you watch the Planning Commission, you'll see people coming in with smaller lots, houses on smaller lots. It's going to have to happen. There's things that the 2035 talks about for a 20-year growth and for our city, and things we need to be cognizant of as we grow. Roads are one of them. So now, they created a land use map and said this is the area the next 20 years you'll be growing. And then Neil Schaefer, who is the traffic consultant on it, basically look at the densities, and they plug in those areas, and then they come out with this road I'll call it a road improvement, but major transportation plan. There is $1 billion worth of road improvements right here. Now, granted, it goes out to 2040, but you know who the taxpayers of the city of Murfreesboro. In fact, we are number 2 in the state as far as road construction, road builders. The city of Murfreesboro is. Number 1 is the state of Tennessee. We're number 2 in the state. That's pretty impressive. Another thing that's kind of impressive is all the developers that come in, when they develop, we have them to make improvements, and we average about 50 cents on the dollar. So if we took all the road projects we've done in the last several years, and we look at the cost to the taxpayers, about half of that's subsidized by the developers in town, just to let you know, because if they're going to come in and build something, they build a lot of roads or they donate the land. They'll donate the land. You got to have 2 things to build a road. You got to have a place to build the road, and you got to have money to do it with. So anytime we can get a place to build roads, we get it and we keep it, because we know in the future we're going to be probably building the road, and this thing is divided up. You have your short term, mid-term, and long term. And I'm going to leave this map so you can come up and take a look at it. It is. I talked to our IT, Gerald Lee, in our IT department. He's in the process of getting this on the internet where you can go actually on and see. But you can look in here and you can see the state routes. We have them identified. And then you can see these connector roads, and then there'll be a little legend on it that'll tell you if it's long term, short term, and then this talks about when those roads will be in short term. And sometimes they change. The state may come in, just like right now, they're fixing to start before the end of the year, New Salem Highway. They're going to start 4-lane in New Salem. There's 2 parts to New Salem. They're going to start from Old Fort, and then they'll pick up and go to Veterans. Another one that's near and dear to us, if you live on the north side of town, we're hoping it gets pushed up in the future, is Thompson Lane. We all know Thompson Lane needs to be 4-laned as well. But you're welcome to look on this, and what we've done over the last 10 to 15 years is we built a lot of roads that parallel the river and CSX. Does anybody know why we've built them that parallel CSX and the railroad? Cost. Going across CSX and the railroad is really expensive because we got to put a bridge in there. Bridges are extremely expensive. So what we have done is we have built just about all the parallel roads we can. As I like to say, the chickens are coming to roost. We're going to have to start building roads across CSX. Cherry Lane, for instance. Cherry Lane will come from 231 to Broad Street. It's got to go at some point across Broad CSX, go over to hit Florence Road, and then we hope eventually it'll go from Florence Road over to 840 where we can get an interchange. Now that's down the road a piece, if you will, no pun intended, but those roads that are bisect the river and CSX are going to be very important. Just like eventually, if you go down Northfield right now, T-bone's in the Broad, right? Eventually, that will go across the river in CSX and go over and hit Thompson Lane. Those are all on here. Now, I can't tell you exactly when, but if it's in, and there is a description in here if you'll look see whether it's short term, long term, or what have you. Now, what I was going to tell you, some of these things do move up. If we have a developer come in here and he buys 400 or 500 acres and says, I want to build, which is probably a 10 or 15 year build out on a development. Shelton Springs, for instance, that is a major deal, and when it's fully built out, about 700 homes. So roads may get pushed up that normally wouldn't get put. Something may be down in here and get pushed up to here because of that development. So they took all that information. They tried to plug it in best we can, but this is a living document. This is one thing I want to point out. As things change in our city, as things happen, this thing has got to be a living document. It has to be fluid, because some things will get moved up, some things will get pushed back. And it's due to economics. The state can come in. We have a lot of state routes going through our city. The state can come in and decide they want to partner up with us to improve a road. Well, if they move up one, then it'll get moved up on this map as well. I think that's about all the time I have. I appreciate y'all being so patient. And again, remember, I'm from the government. We're here to help. And we're not happy till you're unhappy, okay? Thank you.